You know when you leave your phone in an Uber and think, well, that was an expensive mistake? Now imagine that times a few million, because that's the kind of expense these human oversights racked up. There are so many mistakes, but we tried to pick some of the most interesting, avoidable, and costly. These cringeworthy and sometimes tragic mess-ups are the kind you just wish you had stayed home from work. The upside is that they might leave you feeling okay with the mistakes you have made in your life. Nanfangao Bridge collapse. The Nanfangao Bridge suddenly fell apart when an oil tanker truck was crossing over the structure. The cause of the failure is still under investigation, but preliminary evidence points to corrosion in the bridge's suspension cables as the possible cause. The 320-ton arch crashed down onto the truck and boats below the bridge, killing 6 people and injuring 12. The Nanfangao Bridge was 460 feet long and 59 feet high. It was the only steel single-arch bridge in Taiwan, the first bifurcated single-arch bridge in Asia, and one of only 2 bridges of its kind in the world. Sung Yuqi, dean of the Taipei Technology College of Engineering, suspected that the cables were so weakened that when the first one snapped, it triggered a chain reaction of other cables breaking in quick succession, rapidly leading to the bridge's collapse. When the deck of the bridge gave way, the force between the base's steel-reinforced concrete and the steel girders was also compromised, causing the arch to fall. While the bridge was only built in the late 1990s, making it fairly new for such a structure, it was based on an older design that didn't factor in the sophisticated modern protections against natural erosion that are needed to protect the bridge. The Taiwanese government has committed to building a replacement bridge within 3 years at a cost of almost $17 million. NOAA satellite mishap. NASA investigators have issued their final report into last year's embarrassing accident in which the NOAA N-Prime weather satellite, a $233 million piece of space technology, was significantly damaged after falling off a handling cart in the Lockheed Martin factory because workers failed to install 24 bolts. The responsible test engineer did not assure the turnover cart configuration through physical and visual verification as required by the procedures but rather through an examination of paperwork from a prior operation. Had he followed the procedures, the unbolted turnover cart adapter plate would have been discovered and the mishap averted. Errors were also made by other team members, who were narrowly focused on their individual tasks and did not notice or consider the state of the hardware or the operation outside of those tasks. The technician supervisor even commented that there were empty bolt holes. The rest of the team and the responsible test engineer in particular dismissed the comment and did not pursue the issue further. Finally, the lead technician and the product assurance inspector committed violations in signing off the turnover cart verification procedure step without personally conducting or witnessing the operation. Lockheed Martin foot the astronomical $135 million repair bill. If I was the one paying that, I think I'd have fallen over. Bitcoin blunder. If things had gone just a bit differently, James Howells might today be as rich as the Queen of England. Initially, most people had treated Bitcoin as a curiosity, but it had since risen significantly in value, and was now starting to find acceptance as something you could actually use for buying and selling things. Howells had known about Bitcoin from the start. Almost 5 years earlier, shortly after the cryptocurrency was developed, he'd learned about it in an online forum. The Bitcoin system, which operated by linking individual computers together to form a vast, secure network, appealed to him immediately. Howells downloaded free software that made it possible to acquire Bitcoin. He would lend his computer's processing capabilities to help the Bitcoin system create a permanent record of network transactions, and, in return, the program would let him keep some currency. A private key, a unique chain of 64 numbers and letters, granted him exclusive access to his Bitcoin stash. He soon set his gaming laptop to spend the overnight hours mining Bitcoin, as the process came to be called. But the mining took a lot of processing power, causing the laptop to overheat. The computer's whirring fan began to irritate his wife, and he decided to stop. It wasn't worth putting up a fight, he remembers. Half a year later, the spilled lemonade destroyed his gaming laptop. He transferred some of the hard drive's contents to a new iMac, but he did not bother with the Bitcoin folder. He then extracted the hard drive and put it in the desk drawer. By the time Howells ended his mining project, He had accumulated 8,000 coins, and in the fall of 2013 that stash was worth about $1.4 million. Panicked, he checked his desk drawer. In it, he found the empty hard drive, not the one with the Bitcoin folder. Howells remembers thinking it was a good thing that there was no way to access your Bitcoin without a private key, because it meant that no one could seize your Bitcoin, either. When Howells had his oh moment, his hard drive was already buried under other people's trash. Around the time that his Bitcoin became worth $6 million, he confessed to his wife. She was shocked to learn of the potential windfall, and encouraged him to go to the dump to see if anything could be done. He desperately began combing nearby landfills and dump sites in an attempt to retrieve his missing millions, but has never recovered the lost drive. To really rub salt in the wound, on November 8, 2021, Bitcoin's prices peaked at an unbelievable $67,582 per Bitcoin. That meant, somewhere in an English landfill, an unsuspecting old hard drive was actually worth a staggering $5 billion. Hubble Mirror Fiasco. In April 1990, after decades of planning and work, the famous Hubble telescope, which at the time was worth $1.5 billion, was launched into space. Shortly after the Hubble Space Telescope's launch in 1990, operators discovered that the observatory's primary mirror had an aberration that affected the clarity of the telescope's early images. Hubble's primary mirror was built by what was then called PerkinElmer Corporation, in Danbury, Connecticut. Once Hubble began returning images that were less clear than expected, NASA undertook an investigation to diagnose the problem. Ultimately, the problem was traced to miscalibrated equipment during the mirror's manufacture. The result was a mirror with an aberration 1/50th the thickness of a human hair, and the grinding of the mirror. Replacing the mirror was not practical, so the best solution was to build replacement instruments that fixed the flaw much the same way a pair of glasses correct the vision of a nearsighted person. The corrective optics and new instruments were built and installed on Hubble by spacewalking astronauts during a shuttle mission in 1993. The Corrective Optics Space Telescope Axial Replacement (COSTAR) instrument, about the size of a telephone booth, placed into Hubble 5 pairs of corrective mirrors that countered the effects of the flaw. Between 1990 and 1993. The costly mistake leading to COSTAR's development ultimately set the entire project back a further $50 million. A magical mistake. 2 decades ago, Rowling introduced us to a universe existing next to our own, full of wizards, witches, goblins, and house elves. For younger generations, it is hard to remember a time when Harry Potter, one of the most recognized characters in literature, didn't exist. What is even more difficult to imagine is a time when the author who created the character struggled to keep food on the table. Finishing the book was only the beginning. Rowling now had a novel, but she needed a publisher. Her first attempt ended in rejection, as did the second and third. It took an alleged 13 tries for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone to gain acceptance from a publisher. The Sorcerer's Stone hit shelves on July 26, 1997, to immediate success. Overnight, Rowling was catapulted from her small apartment in Edinburgh to worldwide recognition. J.K. Rowling's original synopsis of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was on display at the British Library earlier in 2018. It became an international bestseller, and was soon converted into a well-loved film series which only fueled Harry Potter fever. By 2018, 500 million books had been sold worldwide, and the entire Harry Potter franchise was worth an eye-watering $25 billion. While the series has concluded, Harry Potter is still very much the jewel of Bloomsbury's publishing crown, helping it pull in over £162 million in 2020 alone. That's over $200 million. Blockbuster blunder. There are times when you look back on your career and all you can think is, oops, I really screwed up that time. You have to assume that's what former Blockbuster CEO John Antioco says to himself every time he remembers a meeting he had in Dallas in September 2000 and every time he streams a movie to his TV. Netflix co-founder Mark Randolph describes a meeting he attended with Antioco along with Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings and its then CFO Barry McCarthy at Blockbuster headquarters in Dallas. Everyone from Blockbuster who was at that meeting must cringe when they think back on it now. The company could have bought Netflix that day for $50 million, but its CEO didn't even bother to consider the possibility. He seemed to see it as a great big joke. Randolph, Hastings, and McCarthy were in rural California at Netflix's first ever corporate retreat when McCarthy got word that Blockbuster wanted to meet with them. At the time, Netflix was in trouble. The dot-com crash had made its once rosy future look grim. The idea of a DVD by mail rental service, which was all that was possible in that era of slower download speeds, was catching on, but not quickly enough for the company to be anywhere near profitable. Needless to say, Blockbuster did not accept Netflix's offer or make a serious counteroffer. 2 years after rejecting Netflix, Blockbuster went on to create a video-on-demand service partnered with Enron. Blockbuster still couldn't recognize the importance of video on demand and didn't pay much attention to that side of the business. As a result, Blockbuster walked away from Enron in 2001. Netflix and its other competitors started eating Blockbuster's competition. Blockbuster came up with video on demand only 5 years after its competitors and took even longer to scrap its late fee. Netflix was enjoying its $116 million earnings along with no store overhead costs, while Blockbuster was going through an identity crisis and bearing a loss of $518 million in 2009. When the world went into lockdown in 2020, the 190-country service was valued at an astonishing $194 billion, more than 38 times that of Blockbuster's peak. Do you know of any other catastrophically costly mistakes that could have been avoided? Let me know in the comments below, and they might just make it into a future video. Thanks for watching.